it.
So, Maysha, you know how I'm going to begin, right?
I do. In the beginning,
There was only energy, neither good nor bad, just
just energy. Hey, you all, this is Maysha with As Long as You're Breathing. And obviously, Pam's in the house. And we have also Pam, of course, of Sacred Energy Management, Dianna, Leeder of Crave More Life Coaching, and of course, Sheri Moise, who has been with me now from the beginning and has taken such good care of me, and I love so very much, of Heart, Mind, Mentoring, and Training. And I'll let her tell you all about the other stuff whenever she talks. But what we're here for today is we're doing a roundtable, and we want to talk about what most people term as conscious awakening or spiritual awakening. And I've decided to call it energetic awakening because that's what I'm doing these days, is changing up the vernacular of everything. But it's basically, we want people to understand that not everyone has spiritual or conscious or energetic awakening the same way. That not so. There may be something going on with you in your life and you're like, I'm not sure what this is. It's not matching what other people are talking about or what I'm hearing the most about. And so we want you to know that, of course, it's all going to be, you're the one and only you. It's going to be unique to you. But there are many different people in the world experiencing this in many different ways. And so that's what we want to talk about today. All right. So Sheri Moise, let's hear about what you have to say about what becoming more consciously aware or spiritual awakening or energetically awake, whatever terminology you want to use. Let's hear from you, Sheri, please.
All right. So I feel like listening to both Diana and Pam, there's so many similarities and things that I can really relate to, which is, I hope for people listening that gives you some, opportunity to just say, this isn't a normal thing. I grew up very much someone type A, perfectionist. So was always looking for the right way that something should be occurring. And even now, like I said, as I was thinking about what I wanted to share today, I was like, if I really had a spiritual awakening, like, what does that even mean? And so I really appreciate the frame that you put around this, Maysha, that, and how I say as well, there's no one way, there's just your way. And so, for me, I think my first real curiosity was, I grew up in the Jewish tradition, and I remember being in my rabbi's office and in junior high, and there's a book called The Still Small Voice. And it was that moment of understanding for me that there is a God spark within me. Like, I'm part of something bigger. And I still to this day, like, can remember being in that office in that moment and having that realization. I didn't do much with it after that. It was almost comforting, just in the sense of like, okay, maybe some of the things I've been sensing, noticing aren't, now I can look back and know that I saw things, that there were shadows in my room or energies that now I can recognize that. At the time, I had no one to talk to about these things. I didn't know what they were. And so I really shut it down. Like, that's not happening. This is not part of my experience. And so, I really went along in life, trying to do all the right things. But I've always been a caretaker, always been helping people, always been drawn to being of service in some way, shape, or form. But I spent most of my life, post-college in corporate. But even back then, I can look back and I was always knowing the shortest path, the best way to get things done. I could read people. Somebody, I can't remember, said they talked about themselves being a chameleon. I can very much resonate with that. Like, I knew how to be with someone and be available in the way they needed me to be available. That I knew when I needed to shh and just listen and when I needed to share. So I just assumed that was a really great tool as a salesperson, which it is. And I didn't really connect the dots of those gifts that I was utilizing until much later. I am fortunate enough to have two very amazing stepsons. I'm part of a blended family, and their mom is actually a great gift to me. She was the first person in my life to acknowledge that I had gifts and to really give me that little poke, often a shove, of, this is what you're experiencing, and what about this? And, she would just say to me all the time, because I would say, there's this buzzing in my ear, or there's something going. She'd say, just ask. I'm like, who am I supposed to ask? Like, why? I don't know what to do with this. You're telling me to just ask. And I'm like, I'm crazy. That's crazy. Like, how would I just ask? But so I'm really very much so grateful to her for, giving me a safe space, to have those conversations and to get curious and to watch her journey in her way. And, but it was some time before I would really look at that for myself. And I often think, there's the breakdown before the breakthrough. Some big event happens in our life. Oftentimes I think if it's for myself, for a lot of people, some health crisis that brings us, I know Pam talked about that, where we begin searching for some other answers. And that was really the case for me. Was I really had overdone the type A thing. And, physically, once I released some obligations in my life and shifted the way I chose to show up, I was in a space physically and mentally of full breakdown. And I had met through the boy's mom, a woman who was teaching theta healing. And she had said to me, go talk to Rochelle, she'll help you. There's some energetic things that, you need to be worked that would be helpful for you. And it was the first time in my life that I had ever even thought about seeing someone that was spiritual like that, or that I had even really fully been exposed to that. And, but I say that's probably not true, because I was curious before that. I wanted answers. And so I would go to this woman in town who was a tarot reader and a channel. And she was actually the first person to say to me, you have this gift. You could help people cross over. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Who are you talking to? There must be someone else here, because you are not that. That is not me. And I'm like, she's like, you don't have to do anything with that. But you should know how to manage it. You should know how to work with it. Because, and she asked me a bunch of questions, like, is this happening? And I could now see, like doors in my house would slam out of the blue, strange things would happen. There were energies here that were trying to get my attention. And I'm so oblivious, I'm not paying attention to them. And so that was really the first time anyone had told me I had gifts, or that I had thought of the things that I was experiencing as gifts. And so I think if I was going to say, that woke me up in a more powerful way than anything else, because I take these things very seriously. I was like, well, she just gave me instructions. I have to do something about this. So that's when I really started searching. I'm very I want to please people. So I'm like, well, I have to do something about this. Right. So, so I went to I go, I don't even know where to start. What do I do? So I went to, she said, well, shamanism might be a great way, because that is very much, what they do. And so I went to a weekend, and I was terrified. I was just terrified. I was like, there's a certain way you have to do things, and people are seeing things and I don't see anything. This must not be right. This woman must have been completely wrong. Like, I don't know what she's talking about. And there was one young woman in the group, and she was like, I will only work with you. And I was like, but I can't help you. Like, I can't see. And she's like, I don't care. You're the only person here I feel comfortable with. And we were doing a particular exercise, And all I could see at the time were colors. And so I just shared with her what I saw and held space. And she said, don't you ever say that you don't have a gift and that you aren't capable, because that was one of the most powerful sessions I've ever had. And so it really gave me permission. And along the way, I heard that kind of message often in various theta healing classes. One of the instructors, he said, you know, he was joking, but he said, fake it till you make it. Like, the bottom line is, if your imagination, the information you're given, just go with it. Because as long as we're open to possible, we're going to get what we need. And so that was really, and that would be like one of the things that I would say to anyone listening who's been curious about, like, is what I'm seeing, feeling, hearing, knowing right, accurate? I mean, I always want things to be right. I wanted to, get an A on my paper. There's no getting an A here. You get an A+ for being you. You get an A+ for owning that there's no one way, just your way. That's how you get an A+ on this journey. And but it was a journey for me. And I'm so grateful that along the way, I was given all these little doorways that opened me up to possible. I was hiding behind science. I knew I wanted to leave corporate, and I was going to, wanted to help people. I wanted to do something heart-based. I've always said, even then, that I wanted to help raise the vibration of the planet, that I want to connect people to their heart. But I was hiding behind the science. Until one of my clients who I was helping with anxiety, high levels of anxiety, said, what's that other thing you're doing? What's that theta to something thing you're doing? Because I told him what I was doing. We were also friends. And he gave me permission. He's like, you can't do anything wrong. Like, let's just do it. And so there's been so many instances along the way for me where the guides and, creators put someone in my life to say, this is the next door you go through. This is the next possibility for you to explore. And I'm grateful for that, because I'm not sure that that's the way I needed guidance to really step into more of waking up to what's possible for me, which is how I see it. And again, I loved how Pam put it, and Dianna both, like, just it's being more of me. And really honoring who I am and all of who I am. I had an experience once of being at a reunion and was talking to this woman. I'd never met her before in my life, wife of somebody I grew up with. And out of the blue, we're conversing. She says, oh, you're a healer. And I'm looking around. I'm like, this woman she met me 3 minutes ago. Never met me before. And it took me a long time to own that title. And there's a lot of ways we help people to heal. And so I'm really grateful that that's what I needed, and the universe provided those different doorways. For other people, the curiosity of knowing or getting more information is they're studiers and they want to learn, and that opens the door. And I love to learn too, but for me, it was often people, circumstances that led to the next, and then the next, and the next thing that allowed me to see more of who I am and accept more of who I am. And as of late, it's been more of a physical thing for me. It's been headaches or energy or things shifting, like literally in my being, my physical beingness, that I can start to feel. And I never would have necessarily thought of myself as empathic. My strongest gift is knowing. But I realize now that I very much am. And the more that I've opened up to accepting all of who I am, there'll be times when I'm like this rush of sadness or rush of something. And I'm like, that's not mine. How is that? What's going on? So it's, and it's definitely been a journey of I feel like my whole molecular structure on some level on this plane is like reorganizing itself. And I had a great visual the other day. I was talking about it in terms of business or knowing. And I think you and I were talking about this, Maysha. It's like you have all this information and it starts to come in and it just whittles itself down. It gets more focused. And I feel like that's what's happening in my beingness too, this body here in this plane, is that it's getting recalibrated for whatever's next, for me to be able to move through, work with energy, in whatever way I'm meant to. And so it's been a really curious experience in that way.
Yes, thank you so much for all of that. I enjoyed it immensely. I know that when you came into my life, my world was falling apart, and I had no clue that you weren't out in the open with what you did. I had no clue, and so the universe paired us up and said, okay, and we're sending you a gift, and of course it was you, and so thank you so very much. But so I'm just going along, just me being the bear in the china shop that I always am, and I'm just okay. Well, they've given this to me, and so here I go, you know. And then you said, I forget how you put it. You said, "What I respect so much is how you're just doing this. I guess I'm gonna have to." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean? You guess you're gonna have to?" And you're like, "Well, I'm in this world, but I don't really tell people everything I can do in this world." I'm like, "Well, that's got to stop." And so I remember that I was shocked because it was so obvious what your gifts were. And so that people in our world didn't see what your gifts were, that just blew my mind because it was so obvious. But I'm so glad that you have done that. And I'm glad you brought up the change that we're feeling physically, because I've been feeling it all physically the whole time now. And so, but not everyone does, or not everyone has. And of course, there's all this talk, if you're in our world, about how we're becoming more crystalline, or all of those type of things. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about how maybe people are feeling that, maybe they're not. And since you listened to me about it for so long, and then finally you started experiencing some of it, so maybe how that transition happens and how you accept that, because I know you were kind of like, and I'm like, Sheri, this is what's happening. And you're like, no, that happens to you, not to me, because it had to be, although you're very open to it your way, you had your way already figured out in your mind, and it wasn't going to happen that way.
Yeah, there's each unfolding, each like doorway that opens or next page in the book, brings some other realization, some other knowing. But if I'm really honest about it, like, everything keeps there's things in my past, in my life, in my experience that will say, but you were already doing that. Like the unicorns. And I mean, I was adamant with my mother for my bat mitzvah that it had to be a unicorn theme. Had to be. I mean, to the fact, and she couldn't find anything. She literally had to go get something drawn for me. And I have this amazing drawing. But so the unicorns were there, but I wasn't engaged. So there's always some piece of the puzzle, I think, that we can, if we tie it together, we can see it. But, and I can go back and think about in my 20s, as I was finding a new part of myself and my own strength of showing up as me, I had all these stomach issues, all these physical symptoms that I was dealing with. And how did I deal with it? Acupuncture, energy, herbs. Like, I didn't go the traditional route. Even then, I knew that energy was, I needed to move some of that energy. And so, but this time, now that I read more, I see more, I'm more involved in the spiritual world. I think I forget that it can be that simple, if that makes sense. Like, it just is. So if we're always reforming, we are energy in motion, our cells are reforming and moving. We're adaptive creatures in this plane. So why not it be that we are our bodies can be lighter, light bodies. And I think there is a lightness that comes the more you accept and honor who you are. And so that's where I think that energetic shift comes in. And when we're not, or when there's this next piece, it's like the headache will come, that this comes over. And I know oftentimes that it's just me needing to be open to some other information, and I'm shutting down, I'm putting my head in the sand, and it hurts because I'm not open.
Not letting the energy move. Yeah, so it gets stuck. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Stuck energy.
Which is what the source of all of our health issues, everything, is that we are energy in motion, and we're not allowing the energy to move. And so, but we didn't know, and now we do. So, all right. So ladies, who would like to engage here with Sheri?
I do. I have a couple of things. So you talked a little bit about the chameleon, which was what I talked about. And I can't remember exactly how you termed it. I think it was when you were talking about you would get these rushes of sadness or whatever, and they weren't, where was it coming from? And I could hear chameleon written all over that. Yeah, okay, I'm just going to move into that. I got it. Whatever it is, I got it. I can take care of it. And I think that in the early times when we don't understand our empathic abilities, that's all we can do. That's all we know to do. We haven't been taught any differently. Just like you said, you had no one to teach you. I didn't either. And so how do you learn except through life experiences and getting to that place? And sometimes maybe we never get there. So you can talk a little bit more about that if you want, but there was also the healer part that you talked about, being told you were a healer. And I think I heard you say what I'm going to say I feel too, is that I don't heal anybody. I open the space, that sacred space, and I allow them and their God to do the healing. But it freaks me out when people say I'm a healer. I mean, it's just, Dianna gave me healing artist, and I kind of was able to kind of move away from that healer part. So talk a little bit about those two things if you can.
Sure. The one question that someone along the way gave me, and I use it often with my clients and people in my circle, is to ask the question, is this mine? So if you're feeling out of sorts and it seems like it came out of nowhere, or you're like, there should be no reason why I'm feeling sad right. That would be my thing. Like, why am I feeling sad? I have no reason to be sad right now. So asking that question, is it mine, really is empowering. And I think that's really important, is to have tools in your toolbox that empower you to be your sovereign self. To know that this is your journey, it's your way, and you get to honor this physical body that you're in, and it doesn't need to be taxing. We don't have to move through it fast. Not to be judgmental, but when I talk to people and they talk about using psychedelics and other things to access that next level of spirituality, it concerns me, because I feel like if they're using it all the time, they're not really trusting in their own gifts. And we have that same access within ourselves. And so, and if you're not able to access, then getting support and a container so that you feel safe to play. It's like, it should be playful and fun and joyful experience. And if it's not feeling joyful, then we're working at it. And that's an energy I choose not to be in. So there's that piece of it. And then the healer piece, I totally agree, Pam. Like, I love, there's a couple of folks, I was always taught, when I learned what I think theta healing was great for me to learn from, versus the shamanism piece was scary for me because there was one, you know, you had to go up this way and down this way. And if I did it wrong, I was scared that I was going to cause a problem. Whereas when theta healing, I was taught, you know, you're just creators working through you. You are just the channel. You are the vessel. Another woman I work with who works through shamanism, she says you're a hollow bone. And so I really appreciated that. It took the fear out of being able to support others, knowing that I can't do anything wrong because I'm just the channel, the vessel for their own journey, for their healing. And I'm just here to hold space and to be that guide. That early gentleman that I spoke to about who gave me permission, you know, and hold space for me to play in that realm with him. He called me a spiritual guide is what he originally called me. And I prefer that. I prefer to be, I talk about being a mentor and a guide. I don't prefer the word coach. I work with a lot of, you know, spiritual people or spiritual entrepreneurs who are all guides, and I prefer to be just be that guide. I feel like I'm just helping people cruise through whatever that room is they're exploring in that moment, whether it's business or personal, it doesn't matter. It's all interrelated.
Yes.
I've just come across that word guide as well. And that feels more natural to me than coach. I don't really think of myself so much as a coach, even though I know that's what I'm doing is, you know, coaching my clients through things, but I really am guiding them more so than coaching them. So that feels more natural to me too. So thank you for that. Those were very good points to be made, I think. Thank you.
I'm kind of curious too, Sheri. So you and Pam have connected to the term guide. For me, it was very important for me to recognize and be open about my intuitive ability. And I would never, 3 years ago, I would never have thought that I would be owning that term. But, I knew in a very split second that I needed to do that to give myself permission to let it grow. So it wasn't very long into this when I went into my website and, before every term coaching, I put intuitive, I did. And I appreciate the healer term. I'm not sure that I own that in the same way, but I appreciate, I consider the three of you to be healers, because I think any kind of, we're here in this space with someone else and we are supporting their healing. Are we actually, fixing something? Well, maybe some of us are. But I think, for me, it kind of comes back to what, we're owning what we're comfortable with, of course, but knowing that, those gifts are a huge, huge deal to people who are not connected themselves, or they need to heal somewhere or progress, I think is the new word, right, Maysha?
Progress.
Yeah. I'm not sure I can keep track of them all, but I did remember that one. Yeah. So I like, I'm not sure that I would refer to myself as a healer necessarily, but I like the fact that people know that they can heal through that guidance that all of us are getting. They can heal through that. Yeah. So sorry, my take, but I also wanted to say in more of a fun way that it's really cool that it was your stepson's mom that started this for you and pointed out your magic, which, because that could have gone a very different way.
Yeah, we have a very unique and but I think healthy, the fortunate relationship. I wish that more blended families had that opportunity to see what's possible. But yeah, it was really powerful.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I also liked how so that was your first example, but then, you gave all kinds of other examples where, that door opened or that person arrived or, wherever it was. And it's always interesting to me how we, and I think it comes back to just, how we develop our awareness. It's just very cool that we can be, and I'll put it in quotes, like influenced by those things happening for us. Taking that information in, taking that, well, listen to what she just told me. Is that true for me? What's your favorite line? Is that true for you, or is that true?
What's true about that? What's true about that?
Yeah.
And I think validation is huge. And so I think had I not gotten validation all the way along, like I probably would have, and I tried to turn my back, right, on what's happening. So one of the things that I think is really, really important is to have people around who validate you and your gifts, and to be in some sort of community or have some connection with someone. I constantly was getting validated. I would question my abilities, and then I would be doing a practice session when I was doing theta healing, and people would be like, "Oh my God, that's so spot on. How did you know that?" And I will get like these, like, I have to say something. And I realize that it's like information coming through, and I'm literally like leaning in, like I have something to say, but I've learned to temper that. And so that I could really listen, so that I could have the discernment to know, am I supposed to just share that, or am I supposed to ask a question? But because I've had that validation, I really do believe that I know things and see things and have that. And I loved what you said, Diana, like collecting those wins. Someone will say to me, "Oh, I needed to hear that," or it will be the perfect, in that moment. And the downloads, I'd like to talk about this for a second, because I think people get confused about like downloads and what does that really mean? How I see it is like this information dump that comes, where it's like Pam was describing it, where it was like or Dan, I can't remember, both of you probably, because we all have the same experience, where it's just like all of a sudden it's like, boom, that email gets written, that thing that I've been, or it's just, and it's always been there. I was just looking back at information I too 10 years ago. I was saying to Maysha the other day, I'm not sure how to explain to people how they identify their own heart-mind design, which is something that I teach. Like, you're uniquely you and wired, and you have this beautiful heart mind. And then I literally was going through some papers, and I literally had written out, I have a drawing, and like, your heart mind design, boom, boom, boom. I forgot I had written it. And so when it's that information that comes in, and maybe you don't know what you're supposed to do with it, but you feel really compelled to write it down and capture it. I tell all my clients, like, when we start working together, like, get a brand new journal and capture that information. Because as soon as we light that spark, when you bring someone in and that door opens, that's when the information starts coming. So however you capture what's coming through, it often to me comes in a spark or a flash or in the shower. One of those ways, in the shower, or as I'm getting out of the shower. Voice memo is a phenomenal tool to capture.
So I guess we should explain that the water it's conductive, and we are energy, and so that is a good part of the reason, and we'll leave it at that for that part. But the last thing I'd like, if you don't mind, is talk a bit about your imagination versus your intuition, because am I just imagining this, and the fact that yes and no.
Yeah, I think the best way I can describe that I was able, and I don't know that I've fully integrated both of those pieces, except that I know that they're like two sides of a coin.
Yes.
That's how I would look at it. Like, initially, just, am I imagining that? Like, I would, do these meditations or I'd go up to the 7th plane and I would imagine. And was I imagining, or was it intuition? Was I knowing, or what was it? And I don't know that it matters. I honestly think like the more imaginative you can be, the more you can allow yourself to be curious and just imagine. That's why guided meditation is such a big deal. And so many of us use it and lean into it, is because it allows us to step into the energy of possible. Imagination just means possibility. And then when you're open to possible, the intuitive guidance comes in. And so maybe I imagined or dreamt this whole dream, but what's the message in it? There's the intuitive knowing. So if I were going to tie the two together, I would say play in the imagination and the playfulness. Like I will have people like imagine that they get to pick an amazing coat off this magical rack. And what does that look like? But there's a message in that coat they pick that for them, and a meaning for them. That's the intuitive guidance. And so I think that that's how, as third plane beings, that we can understand intuitive guidance and connect more to it is through our imagination.
Right. Our imagination is in the dimension of the heart space, which is also where the intuition is. And imagine is, can you conceive? And so, can you conceive? The heart conceives, the imagination conceives, the mind creates. Oh, well, the mind has, it's the computer, so it knows what has already happened. But the heart can conceive of things that the mind has not yet experienced. And so when we are thinking, well, I'm just imagining that, yeah, you're conceiving of it. You are conceptualizing it. It is all new. It's imagination to you because the mind hasn't experienced it yet. So that's what imagining is. And our intuition has to come from there, because the mind is what we're transcending to do all of this energetically. Those are the spaces that energetically, that's the dimension for that. The mind is the dimension of protection. And so when people are worrying that they're imagining things, yeah, you are. You're conceiving of something that your mind doesn't know about yet. And your intuition can only come through that. And that's why understanding the energy of all of this is so important. When we take it down to it's just energy, then it's like, oh, wait. So the mind does this, the heart does this. They're energetically, that's what they, holy smokes, I didn't imagine anything. I conceived of it. I intuited it. I got the hit, and it's all the same thing then. And then we give people permission to open up to, as you say, to the possible. And so, yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the work you do in the world, and to making this, not a scary thing for people to go through. I think people get really fearful and worried and about, there's so many stories around spiritual awakening. And I love the reframe that you're putting on this about energetics, and that it is just energy in motion, and we are energy in motion. And so where are we moving to? And that we can be a part of the process. It doesn't have to take us out. Although sometimes it can feel that way, but so grateful to the work you're doing and the way you're sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
As long as you're